Hello everyone, I am Muskan from Brainart Educators team and I am here to present an English revision series for you all. I know your board exams are coming, right? And you all must be worried about your chapters and which all chapter you should do right now. I have many questions from my students. Ma'am, I have problem in this question, I have problem in that question. So here I am to present you the first chapter of the series, that is On the Face of It. We will revise the chapter one by one. First we will know about its playwright, then its theme, its scenes, similarities between the characters and most importantly the characters obviously. What we will do in this particular series is I'll help you out to answer all your questions. I'll help you out to write the questions which ask you about the themes, the questions which ask you about the turning point between turning point of Derry's life. So let's start with our chapter first. This is the playwright. Who is a playwright? Playwright is a person who writes a play. Okay, do focus on the spelling, my students. Play and write is W-R-I-G-H-T. So it's written by Susan Hill. So the playwright of On the Face of It is Susan Hill. Now let's come on to the different part of this chapter, that is the theme. So where is the theme focusing? The theme is focusing, it is basically an interaction between two people. You must have read about the two characters of this chapter. Who were they? Mr. Lamb and Derry, right? And you must know about it that they both are physically impaired, right? So here we are, they both are suffering from a physical impairment. Do remember these while writing your answers. It will enhance the quality of your answers. The second point you can write in your theme is that they deal with the sense of loss. A sense of isolation. Why isolation? Do you remember that Mr. Lamb used to live alone in his house and Derry, he also did not have any friends, right? So they both dealt with the sense of loss and sense of isolation. But as we read the play, we come to know how they overcome it. Let's go on to the third point. That are the scenes. On the Face of It divided it into three scenes. The first scene is in Mr. Lamb's garden where Derry plucks the crab apples. I hope you guys remember. The second one is in Derry's house where Derry and his mother has a fight in between them. And the third scene is between Mr. Lamb's garden again. I won't go at the ending right now. We'll do it at the later stage. Now let's come to the similarities of these characters. I'll come on to the differences later on, but first let's understand which words, how you can write these sentences in your exam. The first similarities is both are the victims of disabilities and physical impairment. Okay. The second disability which we can write, or the sentence which we can write in our exam is both have a vacuum in their heart. Have you ever thought why they have a vacuum in their heart? Because they have a sense of isolation, the sense of loss in their heart. The third similarities is that though they both are different sides of a same coin. Now we'll proceed on to the differences between Mr. Lamb and Derry. So last point which we read was that both are different sides of a same coin. Let us know how they both are different sides of a same coin. First of all, the question which comes to you all is how Mr. Lamb was different from Mr. Derry? From Derry, right? And how Derry was inspired from Mr. Lamb? So these all questions will be answered through these things which I will be explaining you right now. Let's start with it. Mr. Lamb. कौन थे वो? याद है ना? He was an old man who lives alone. He had no children, no wife, nobody else who lived in his house, right? So he lived alone. And what did he do when he lived alone? He used to pick the crab apples and make jelly out of them. Do remember this point while writing your answers. On the other hand, Derry was a 14-year-old young boy. He was just 14 years old. Okay. When I just shifted my point to Derry, I said on the other hand. So whenever you are writing these differences, do use these words on the other hand, on contrary, on the other side. So now let's proceed further. While reading the chapter, we came to know that Mr. Lamb was optimistic. Optimistic का मतलब he was very positive towards life, है ना? And how we come to know about it? He was very full of energy. I hope you guys have read the point where he was telling about bees. What do the bees do? Buzz, right? And it's very annoying. I can understand. But what did Mr. Lamb interpret? He said that the buzzing sound, he does not see it as the buzzing sound. He sees it as the humming sound. Which actually means singing. So वो क्या सोचते थे कि bees buzz नहीं कर रही हैं, वो sing कर रही हैं. See how the perspective has changed. The second point was flowers and of weeds. Right? What are weeds? Unwanted plants जो साइड में होते हैं जिनको काट दिया जाता है. Right? But what according to Mr. Lamb? According to Mr. Lamb, flowers and weeds both represent life. Both are growing. Both represent life. Therefore, again we see that he is very optimistic towards life. But on the other hand, when I talk about Derry, Derry was not that optimistic. So what is the antonym of optimistic? Pessimist. Correct, students. So he was very pessimist. He has a very repulsive, a very negative attitude towards life. उसे कोई कुछ भी कहता था, he used to be very angry. He never used to think in a positive way. Now let's come to Mr. Lamb again. Mr. Lamb had a tin leg. I told that they both had the similarities, right? So what was the similarity? Mr. Lamb had a tin leg because of the bomb explosion. Now, like people used to tease him, similarly, children used to say him Lamby Lamp. But as he was optimistic, he never used to think about it and he was very happy with it. On the other hand, when I talk about Derry, what about Derry? Derry's half face was burnt due to the spilling of acid on his face, because of which he developed a negative attitude towards his life. He never wanted to speak to anybody over there or with his parents also. The other part, Mr. Lamb, he was an extrovert. How? उनके जो windows होते थे, it used to be open, right? उनके जो doors होते थे, open होते थे. उनकी openness भी reflect होती है through open doors and windows. He used to welcome every person out there. He never used to tell people to stay away from his house, right? And on the other hand, if I talk about Derry, he was an introvert, right? We know about the conversation between Mr. Lamb and Derry, right? And we never come to know about that Derry was extrovert. Derry was extremely introvert. He never used to connect with anybody, neither with his friends. He never had any friends, okay? The other thing which we come to know about Derry was he suspects everyone and lacks interest. Whenever he used to go on a road, he used to suspect everyone. There was a scene as well where Derry said कि वो जो ladies वहाँ खड़ी थी, they were talking about me. They were saying that this face will only be kissed by a mother, nobody else. So he lacks interest in everybody out there. Next, Mr. Lamb again. So Mr. Lamb is a source of inspiration to depressed and gloomy. Through this particular play, we came to know that Mr. Lamb ने डेरी को काफ़ी इंस्पायर किया लाइफ में. पॉजिटिव थिंग्स बताई, उसकी फिलॉसफी, अपनी फिलॉसफी ऑफ लाइफ बताई, बिल्कुल पॉजिटिव कर दिया अपनी लाइफ से रिलेटेड और उनको भी पॉजिटिव समझाया. Similarly, he was very inspirational to Derry. On the other hand, Derry, he was a very defiant and withdrawn character. Use these words, defiant and withdrawn. Okay. Now, the last point about Mr. Lamb. Mr. Lamb bestowed love, trust and generosity in Derry, right? And which changed Derry's perspective towards life, right? This is actually related to the ending. I'll come on to the ending in few minutes. So, and when I talk about Derry, he was highly sensitive to what others says. As we discussed, he was very sensitive to anybody's point of view. He never used to hear anybody. Okay. So as Mr. Lamb bestowed trust, love and generosity in Derry, everything started to change. Act 2 tells that Derry had a fight with his mother. What did he say? His mother said, no, you are not allowed to go to Mr. Lamb. But Derry said, no, I will go back to Mr. Lamb. Rest, and at the end, he went to Mr. Lamb. So what was the ending? At the ending, Mr. Lamb died. Why? Because he fell off the ladder, right? So let's focus on the ending. Though it is quite dramatic, but it does not spread gloom. Rather, it acts like a beacon light. Why a beacon light? Have you ever thought about it? Why? Because now Derry can think in a positive way about his life. Mr. Lamb has handed over his philosophy of life. Remember, positive philosophy of life to Derry and inspired him to find out what he wants to be. So in short, it was a very inspirational story. It was a very inspirational play for the ones who are actually very physically impaired. So now let's talk about some important questions which can be put up in your board exams. So the first question is, how did Mr. Lamb's meeting with Derry became a turning point in Derry's life? ये जब हम differences भी कर रहे थे तो हमने पढ़ा था that Mr. Lamb was very optimistic, right? And what about Derry? He was pessimistic. So जब आप लोग अपने आंसर्स लिखोगे आपको ये बताना पड़ेगा कि मिस्टर लैम्ब अपनी पूरी पॉजिटिव फिलॉसफी ऑफ लाइफ से उन्होंने कैसे इंस्पायर किया डेरी को और डेरी की लाइफ चेंज हुई. ओके, द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन विच कैन बी पुट अप इज डेरी सेड इट मीन्स द एसिड ate up me. How did this affect his attitude towards life? How was Derry's attitude towards life? Repulsive. He was defiant. He was pessimist. Use these 3 words while writing your answers. Just don't write these 3 words. Do explain them also. Okay. So how was he very repulsive and negative towards life? He never had any friends. He lacked social interaction. Explain these points while writing your answers. The third question which can be put up is, what did Derry's mother think of Mr. Lamb? In Act 2, Derry's mother did not allow Derry to go back to Mr. Lamb, right? I hope you guys remember this. So while explaining this answer, while writing this answer, do mention that Derry's mother was against the idea that Derry would go to Mr. Lamb again. Question number 4. How does Mr. Lamb try to remove the baseless fear of Derry? You think and tell me, how did he remove the baseless fear of Derry? He was very optimistic. Through his optimistic philosophy of life, through telling positive things about life, the bees, the flower, weeds. I hope you guys remember it. He told these things to Derry which made him positive towards his life. The fifth question which can be put up is, Derry and Mr. Lamb both are victims of physical impairment, but their attitude towards life are completely different. Explain. Do check out our differences table. You will be able to answer this question very easily. Okay. So all the best my class 12th. Do well in your exams. If you liked our videos, do share, like and subscribe our YouTube channel Brainart Educators, and we'll be back with our new videos soon.